The topics covered on Ask HR-Dar are in no way a substitute for legal advice. If you are experiencing issues, please consult with your HR department or a labor attorney. Managing employee performance can be one of the toughest tasks for any leader. Today, Darlene will share how to address performance issues effectively, how to handle difficult conversations with clarity and compassion, and how to foster an environment of growth and accountability.
And hey, it's not always the employee's fault, so we're going to look at that too. What we're talking about today are three main topics. First one, the most common sources of workplace conflict. There are a lot, but we're going to look at the top ones that bubble up. The second thing we will cover are the most common reasons people avoid addressing conflict in the workplace. Why do we not talk about the things that need to be talked about? And the third thing is how to have these conversations, how to get it done, and why it's necessary for both leaders and individuals to build these skills and to be able to have difficult conversations respectfully and productively.
Well, I'm all ears. Let's get going with this.
Great. Okay. So the top 5 reasons for workplace conflict. Number 1, no surprise, personality clashes and individual differences. Diverse personalities, varying work styles, and that can come out in work ethic. These all can lead to misunderstandings and tensions at work. So that's number 1. Number 2 is poor communication. How does this show up? What does that look like? It's unclear instruction. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. It's lack of open dialogue. And that comes from open dialogue. There has to be safety and there has to be trust. So we can't talk because I don't feel safe telling you what I need to tell you in the workplace. Inconsistency in communication, meaning it's not always frequent, it's not in the same method, it's not coming from the same messenger, and no one knows what to follow. All can result in conflict and misunderstandings. And there's Dr. Albert Mehrabian, I believe it is, talked about the difference between verbal and nonverbal. And he has the percentages 7, 38, and 55. 7 being verbal. Only 7% of communication is verbal. 38% is tone and all sorts of the color we put into our language. And 55% is our body language.
I would say your body language and the tone probably changes the whole
conversation.
Everything. Yeah.
93%. So we have to pay attention as leaders and as employees when they say, well, that's not what I meant, or that's not what I said. Well, you have to remember it's always with the receiver. We have to think about how are we being received, and is that the message you really want to send? So you can't always throw your arms in the air and say, mea culpa, I didn't mean to do that, when clearly your body language was saying something very different than what you meant to say, or what you were saying verbally.
And how are you dealing with it when there's no recordings or anything, and it's he said, she said kind of thing? Well, this is what I meant. Well, this is what I heard. How do you know who's right?
Yeah, well, we always said in human resources, if there's any HR professionals listening, they'll know this is true, that there's 3 sides to every story. There's one person's, the other person's, and the truth in the middle. So the important thing is having that dialogue with somebody neutral. And if you don't have HR, you've got a supervisor, you've got a manager, you might even have another coworker that understands there is a fundamental conflict and a disconnect between these two individuals, like a failure. We have a failure to communicate.
Oh, I've heard that.
How to find the common ground, or how to say to them, you know what, Darlene, when you said that, highly inflammatory comment, Darlene, when you said that, Kevin heard what you heard, right? And not invalidating it, not saying, well, Kevin is overly sensitive and he's always picking on me, and of course he thinks everything I say is an attack. It's just eliminating all of the emotion around it and saying, what you said offended. Did you realize? Was that your intent? If it wasn't your intent, okay, can we call it a day? Can we say that it was a misunderstanding? We call it a day. In our profession as leaders and in human resources, we always have to look at certain things, because I call that death by 1,000 paper cuts. So if I'm really trying to get under your skin as a coworker, Kevin, I might do things that annoy you. I might communicate in a way that is not above board, is not kind, is not productive for the environment. And that's not egregious, but the frequency of it is not productive, right? So that needs to be corrected. It's
Otherwise, it'll continue. And I think after a while, the person pretty much picks up on the fact that these things are being done deliberately
Absolutely.
by the other person.
Absolutely. And then all of a sudden Kevin blows up, and Darlene, the employee that puts her hands in the air and goes, "Oh, I don't know why you're so upset." Well, absolutely you do. Absolutely. So it's cutting that off. And we always say sometimes there could be some high school situations going on in the workplace, right? Just people getting under each other's skin. So poor communication is a really big one. The third one is unclear roles and responsibilities. And this happens a lot. Ambiguity in job roles. This can cause confusion, disputes over task ownership. And the problem with this problem is that it won't show up, sometimes doesn't show up until the ball drops. And everybody looks around finger pointing going, "Well, I thought you had that and that's on her job. And well, that's not my job." Especially when there's a lot of change in the organization, or we call it scope creep, where a new job or a new assignments come in and it's just being assigned to the busy person because, busy people get things done. And all of a sudden, this one person has a huge job, job accountabilities, job responsibilities, and other people around them aren't working to their capacity.
Now, in your experience, how often have you seen that a lot of this stems from the fact that the job responsibilities or your quote job description were never clearly defined, or somehow over time it evolved, but it was never put in writing?
Absolutely. All the time. Because the job description can sometimes be put together just for the job posting. And if someone's been in a job for over 5 years, 10 years, even in today's day and age, things can change in 3 to 5 years. So it's conceivable that the main categories of your job description, your key result areas, will stay the same, but the task within those can get very large and almost create a new key result area. And that's what doesn't happen, that your job description needs to be reviewed annually. You need to talk about it with your boss or your supervisor to negotiate that these things are still part of your job. But that happens all the time. Such a great question.
Fascinating stuff already. Okay, we're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to talk some more with Darlene, HR-Dar, when we come back.
Welcome back. Just to recap, we were talking about sources of conflict in the workplace, the top 3: personality clashes, poor communication, unclear roles and responsibilities, and number 4 is differing values and beliefs. And this is a lot like number 1, which is the personality clashes and individual differences, because conflicts arise when employees feel differently, think differently, approach problems differently, different generations. We see that now, just how we approach our work. And anybody with opposing values or beliefs, especially on sensitive topics, these things can rear their ugly heads in the workplace. And so it's just like anything else. If you're having a dinner party, don't talk politics and religion, right? Let's keep things neutral in the workplace as well, because no surprise, differing values and beliefs can cause conflict. 5th is workplace stress and high workloads. So increased stress on an individual for having too heavy of a workload or a tight deadline or a changing deadline. And I see that more than I see somebody with too much work.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. Is this ambiguity? Is just somebody's just working their tail off on a goal that they think is it's been told to them that that's important, has to get it done. And then in blindsided from the left is another goal that is due tomorrow morning when they're already working on something that's due tomorrow afternoon. So just this compression of work and this artificial severity around things. As we always say, poor planning on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on mine. It does. It does when some of the bosses are passing it down to you. So,
well, and once again, I guess it comes down, you have to prioritize, right?
Yeah. What if you're not in control of prioritizing? And that's where
There's
people...
the sticky part.
That's exactly what happens is they think, okay, I've got my work week set out, or I have my next 10 hours set out, and I'm going to get this done, and then there's more work on top of them. That is going to happen. That is part of the work world we live in, is that there's never really enough people. There's no people that are no employees just standing around waiting for you to hand them work, right? So everybody's already, or should be already well-purposed in their jobs. What happens is when you just have too much on that one person or a couple of people, or they're covering other people's leaves of absence. That happens. When someone's on a leave of absence, they don't have the employers usually don't have the luxury of hiring someone to replace. Even if it's a temp that doesn't add to their head count, they might be reticent to do it, thinking they can just divide the work up among others. That can be the beginning of a problem.
And that also depends on whether the others have the skill set or the experience to be able to handle.
Exactly. And why not? And so there's a conversation. That'd be a great conversation, Kevin, to have before it becomes a conflict, because these things erode relationships. If I'm just, sitting there feeling like a pack mule and someone's loading more and more work on my back and no one's asking to say, can you get this done by Tuesday? Or could we just sit down and say, hey, listen, this person's out on a leave. You've got the closest experience to them. We'd like you to take on the work for a finite amount of time. Leaders, can leaders please be specific with individuals when you're handing more work to them and say, we need your help for the next 3 weeks to get this across the finish line? Not indefinite. You don't have to disclose why the person's on a leave of absence. A lot of people avoid these conversations because they're afraid of getting into the conversation, but they'd rather just slam the work on someone without telling them that this too shall end. So have that conversation, and then have your employee be able to say to you, okay, did you realize I was working on these other 3 things that are also really critical, and which ones do you want me to not work on?
And you have to be able to feel free to say that without fear of being thought of as not a team player.
Absolutely.
Or not willing to pull your weight.
Absolutely.
Those kinds of fears they have, right?
Yeah. I think fear is the operative word there. No one wants to. Some leaders don't want to confront poor behavior or have the conversations that we just had because they don't want to be seen as the bad guy. And other employees don't want to push back because they don't want the repercussions. We call it the blowback. And this is, perfect segue into why do we avoid difficult conversations. But just to recap, so our job as leaders, though, on the most common sources, the one thing I want to call out to our leaders and supervisors is that please refrain from being the cause of any of these problems. When we're talking about poor communication and unclear roles and responsibilities, you want to get ahead of that and address these issues quickly, frequently, proactively, so that they don't fester and we don't create an unproductive or disrespectful workplace. So let's move into the next areas. Why do people avoid having these difficult conversations? So you just said it in the last little bit, was the fear of the meeting itself, fear of having that conversation. And how do we get over our fears? We prepare, right? We prepare and we just do it. You have practice. You start building that muscle. So fear of the meeting itself. And right now we're talking to leaders worried about having a difficult conversation with employees, or that employee worried about having a hard conversation with their boss or their supervisor, or maybe even another coworker. And I think we're most concerned about conflict. Most people say, I'm afraid of the person getting angry, or I'm afraid of the person crying. I don't do well when people cry. I don't know what to do. Or I'm afraid.
Go
ahead.
Again, it's the emotion factor that
it is, or the awkwardness.
Yes.
Oh, just being in a room alone with this person that you have conflict with, and thinking, oh, how am I going to deal with this? So they just don't do it, and that's a problem. You've got to have the conversation. So fear of the outcome is another reason. So we're worried about blowback and we're worried about retaliation. Just say, oh, sure, Darlene, I'll take care of that for you. But guess what? You used to be on the high priority to put your vacation time in first. Yeah, you're not that anymore, right? Like there's subtle ways that I've seen supervisors and leaders penalize an employee for coming forward. And you could say, hey, listen, we got whistleblower legislation in Ontario. People are allowed to speak up. They should be allowed to speak up. But some people, and I've worked in a situation myself when I was younger, where I was like, no one was going to be able to help me faster than that person could hurt me. Right? So yes, you just try and avoid the fight. So damage to relationships, or even the broader sense is ruining their reputation in the community, is not seen as a team player or a good worker, or fear of the outcome is that I'll get shunned and I won't be able to work anywhere else in this community. Like, just we're talking about these drastic things that people worry about, so they don't say anything, which we know is horrible. Lack of confidence. So people doubt that they can handle what happens when someone starts crying or yelling or whatever, okay? And thinking that they're going to lose control in the meeting. And the number one reason, which seems horrible, is that they just hope it will resolve itself. And I don't know about you, whether it's in your personal life or professional life, but I very rarely see things just go away.
Yeah. Well, the lack of confrontation is what leads to so much of this, right?
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
That's when you start to see things like they start backing down from what they're doing, what we've talked about at other times over the last year, quiet quitting.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And we say that there's people in your environment that have quit, but they haven't left yet. And those people are still getting paid, are still coming in. They might be fooling you, but they're not fooling anyone else in the workplace. So we have to be really cognizant of our really good people doing a really good job and make sure that we're taking care of any poor performers. And that's not always saying that the employee's doing something wrong. It's maybe something's changed for them. And when you have a high performer who all of a sudden disconnects or gets quiet or is missing deadlines, let's not vilify them. Let's not make them the bad guy and say, no, I've had it with Darlene. Now we have to fire her. I'm done with it. Have the conversation and say, hey, Dar, we noticed that you've missed some deadlines. Is there something that we can help you with? Is there something that we should know about? And in that interactive dialogue, you might find out this person's going through a divorce or they're taking their mother to dialysis, so they need to negotiate coming in 15 minutes late every morning for a period of time. It's just so much can get resolved instead of assuming the worst of our fellow workers. And
a lot of good food for thought there.
So all this to say, we know that there's problems at work. We know that we've got to get better at confronting those situations, and it doesn't have to be an argument. We're not talking about burning down the building every time you have a conversation. It's just have that conversation. So one of the tools that's on my website, it's there for free. Full disclosure, I will ask you for your email address so I can send you the link, but it's a free document. It's followed me around in my career. I have it's been litigated and stood up successfully as a tool for correcting behavior and guiding difficult conversations. So while it's written to look like a performance improvement document or a corrective action document for employees, I encourage you, if you want to approach a difficult conversation with your supervisor, with your leader, is that can help you prepare for it as well. So being prepared takes away the fear. We talk about role play. We talk about like sitting in front of your spouse or your best friend or the mirror and running through it and imagining that they're crying. So when they cry, you get them a tissue and you say, do you need a minute to compose yourself? When someone gets angry, you let them go to the end of their anger because they're not having a one-sided argument. You just let them have a one-sided argument. Don't engage. Take a breath. Excuse yourself. Like there's ways to do this, but role play and practice with someone that can pretend to be your boss for you. But the things to go through are to look at the statement of the problem. Like focus on the negative impact to the business. Whether you're an employee talking to the boss or the boss talking to an employee, that'll keep you out of being emotional, and that will keep you from getting personal, right? It's like, it's that's not what it's about. It's about what's happening to the business. So if I'm concerned that a person that I'm working alongside is going out at lunchtime and getting high, because this is very real in our workplace these days, is it substance abuse? But I'm in a manufacturing area and I don't feel safe because I'm down the line from this person. I'm going to talk to the boss and say, I'm concerned about safety for myself and for the workplace and the product we're turning out. So if you focus on what is the problem as it ties to company policy, procedure, workplace guidelines, then that brings it forward and it brings it into the business sense and not a personal sense. And it gets the right items addressed. So you can download the performance improvement document off my website,
All right.
dkstewartconsulting.com. So in closing, this is such a large topic, and it is as vast and varied as there are people on this planet. We've covered a few key points, though, and hope that this helps support any situation that you're finding yourself in when things are not going as well as you'd hoped. The key is to have the conversation, as hard as it may be, when the problem first emerges, of course, so that it can be addressed right away. And remember that silence is tacit approval. So allowing poor behavior by one team member will kill the morale of your great team members. Have that conversation. We'd love to hear your questions on situations you're facing or you're experiencing, or if you need clarity on the form that we've talked about briefly here on the show. So I invite you to get in touch with me on the contacts page through my website. Look forward to addressing your questions on future shows.
Thank you, Darlene, and we'll talk again next week.
Thank you.